But we're going to start by taking you back to the Community Shield between Manchester United and Manchester City. The game was decided by penalties, with the champions City eventually securing their first trophy of the season. Sue, how much can we really learn about both of those sides from the game?
Well, it's going to be a different team at the start of the season. You know, you would say that it wasn't the strongest 11 for both sides. It's quite interesting because I think if you win it, you say it's really important. If you don't, you say, well, it's a friendly to build up for the start of the Premier League season. But it is a trophy, and you could actually see at the end of the game how much it did mean to Manchester City, because it is a trophy. They are winners, and I think for Manchester United as well, obviously beating them in the FA Cup, they probably wanted to do it again. But you can see that obviously Manchester City, you know, they had some of the younger players in there. You could see the quality that they've got. We've seen glimpses of them last season. We've seen it again this year. Yes, without Alvarez, how is it going to be? But you can see that either they'll go and bring somebody else in, or these younger players will come through and be brilliant like they always are. And I think Manchester United, yes, they had injuries, which they struggled with all last season, but they will be much better this year, I'm sure.
We're going to talk about some of their new signings. We just saw two of them in their cars on their way to medical. Stephen, perhaps the biggest boost for Man City came before the game, and that was with the news that Ederson is definitely going to stay.
Yeah, big news. Really important for Manchester City in the way that they play. Might not be... I mean, where would you put him in terms of shot stopping in the Premier League? I'd say he's probably top 4, top 5. In terms of with the ball at his feet and the way Manchester City play, he's number 1. He is phenomenal with the ball at his feet. I mean, even at the weekend, you're looking at some of the times where the players are pressing and he's drilling balls into midfield and dinking them over fullbacks, and he allows players to play higher up the pitch because they know that he will pick them out. He's a top-class goalkeeper. He is. He's, in terms of the modern-day goalkeeper, he's outstanding because of that ability to play. But he just suits the way Guardiola plays. I like Ortega, but I don't think he's in the same class as him.
Yeah, you mentioned Julian Alvarez earlier and life without him. Are you surprised that they've allowed him to go?
I think that's what Pep Guardiola does. I think if a player wants to go and play, go to a different side, he never stands in his way. And he's a top quality player. I think we all know that, whether he's playing in the 9, whether he's playing in the 10, whether he's playing out wide, he can fill in. We saw last season that the quality that he's got. But like I say, Manchester City, always when you think Manchester City may be a little bit weaker this season, they do something else, don't they? So whether that's, like say, bringing in another player, whether that's Pep Guardiola evolving and thinking of a different way to play, or bringing in a younger player. You know, Oscar Bobb's been brilliant through pre-season. They've had a few players that have really sort of shone.
And they've got £80 million to spend.
They have, and they just find a way. But of course, he's a brilliant player that, of course, any team would miss.
So I think it's really good business from City because I don't think he's the type of player. I look at him and think he's like Jesus at Arsenal. Doesn't score enough goals. What's his best position? Not so sure. I think Guardiola doesn't trust him as a number 9. Often will put him on the left-hand side. I think it's one of those situations where if it had been 40 million, City would have just gone, absolutely not, because he's a great squad player to have. But because of that valuation that's come in, they've just gone, we can't turn this down. We can now use that money to go out and buy other players. They're very shrewd, as Sue says, in the way that they sell players. They sell at just the right time, Manchester City. There's a lot of criticism around them because of the financial fair play and the charges against them and the money that's been spent in the past. But on a whole, of late, their running of the football club in the way that they sell players at peak time and get good money for them has been very, very clever.
So they did 4 in a row last season, didn't they? The big question, can they possibly do 5 in a row? Sue? Stephen?
Well, they can. they certainly can. I think that's the question. And Pep Guardiola said it a lot of the times last season, didn't he? He was saying, look, this is really difficult to do 4 in a row. So he's going to say it's going to be even more difficult to do 5 in a row, which, of course,
games, isn't there,
there's more games with the Champions League, the restructuring of that. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be better. I think Arsenal will 100% push them all the way. But I think maybe some of the teams that didn't perform last season because of the amount of injuries that they had, I think that they will get better and they will be more competitive. So, yeah, there's a lot of question marks, but you can say that Manchester City will either be first or second next season.
Why for you?
They're my favourites, yeah. Just purely because of the DNA of the team, the players that they've got. The goal scorer up front is just clinical. The guy holding the trophy there might be getting a little bit older, but you look at when Phil Foden went into that position last year, I see that being more rotation this year. I think Jack Grealish will be a better player again this year for obviously the heartache of missing out on the Euros with England. I think them players will come. There'll be some of them players that will come back hungry. De Bruyne will want to prove this year that his career's not over at Manchester City, and there's a lot of life left in him.
Yeah, and you've got certain Rodri with another medal, haven't you, to add. Right, let's move on to Manchester United. They decided, of course, to stick with Erik ten Hag. And they seem like they have really backed him this summer, Stephen, to push on.
It's interesting that the new ownership's come in, yet he's still going back to players that he's used before.
I mean, he didn't have some available, did he, this weekend?
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is players that he's trying to sign now, the two players that are coming through, Mazraoui and De Ligt, he's used them before, he's worked with them before, and it's almost what is the footballing side behind the team behind the scenes, the technical director, what are they doing? Is he still got full control on the say of that? Or do they actually believe, them players that you've put forward are the right players? I was surprised when he stayed at the club because I think a lot of it came off the back of the FA Cup. But he could be 10 games into the job and find it difficult. The game against Manchester City, a lot of people will say, well, they got a draw. But they sat back a lot of the time. They looked organised in the way that they were. That won't be accepted by Man United fans. They will against City because they know City are a better team. But going up against the other teams in the league, they can't sit back and defend and be organised and counter-attack. Manchester United fans will now want more after a period of 2 years where they say, no, you've moaned a lot about missing players. Now we want to see something completely different.
I think they were the questions, weren't they, last season? It was, what is Manchester United's style of play? What is it going to be? And like you said, against Manchester City, they did sit back and look to hit on the counter. Is that going to change this year? Whenever Ten Hag was asked, he always said, well, I can't play the way that I want to play because of the amount of injuries that I've got. So you think if they do get a fully fit squad, if they do bring in the players that he wants, then we have to see that, don't we? But there was a lot of question marks. It was defensively at times. They looked so easy to play against. Going forward, they didn't create enough opportunity. So there's a lot of things to put right, but they have got a good squad, and if everybody's fit and available, they bring in what they need, they certainly should kick on and be much better than they were last year.
And he's got a whole new coaching team, including Ruud van Nistelrooy. It was interesting, a lot of people were talking on the weekend about the dynamic between those two and what he might be able to bring, Stephen.
Yeah, I quite like the fact that he's changing up the staff. I think sometimes you've got to look at it and go, maybe they're not the right fit for what I need at the moment, and I need to move and progress and to get better. I think from the ownership point of view, they'll be looking at that and thinking, OK, he's willing to change, he's willing to sacrifice people. There isn't a sort of a loyalty to certain people just to give them a job for the sake of giving it. It is, I want to progress at Man United, I want to make them better, so I'm going to have to sacrifice friendships along the way, make sure that they're better.
Would you like having someone like Van Nistelrooy, who's been a manager yourself, as your number two? In Ten Hag's position?
I think you'd know long term there's an aim to be a manager again. Whether that's in your position, I think you've got to back yourself, though. I think you've got to understand that you're the main man and you're good enough. If he can help you along the way, so be it. And the thing is, as well, if he's making bad decisions, why would he get that job long term if he's not trying to help you? I think there's... You're questioning...
It's a really interesting dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, but then you start to question the integrity of someone not doing the job properly to make a long-term game for themselves. Yeah.
Well, it's been a busy window, hasn't it, already for them, and we're waiting for the confirmation of De Ligt and Mazraoui. How much do they add, and where else maybe do United need to strengthen, Sue?
Well, I think they certainly did need to strengthen in those sort of defensive areas just because of the amount of injuries that they had last season, and you just think that De Ligt will fit in, alongside Martinez, left footer, right footer should work. You think if he does want to play progressive football from the back, playing through the thirds, he's very good on the ball. I think a few people were saying, well, has he played enough regularly recently? His injuries, there's a lot of sort of question marks around that, but I think if he's fully fit and firing, then he is a top quality defender. Exactly the same for Mazraoui, and I think that all depended, didn't it, on Wan-Bissaka going out. So yeah, they've already brought in a couple of good additions as well. So yeah, I think you wanted to keep the players, you wanted to keep Bruno Fernandes, you wanted to keep those players and then build around that. So they did need to invest and bring in those players, get rid of some of the players in the squad that maybe, you know, he wasn't going to use and he wasn't going to play. So, yeah, I certainly think they're two good signings.
Yeah, and I think Bruno Fernandes is key. If Manchester United fans are pointing towards something that there is a new regime and a new vision, it's probably him, because there were murmurs, wasn't there, before the FA Cup final that maybe he didn't want to stay, maybe he wasn't completely sold, but the very fact that he is talking about a new contract, that's sort of signs are pointing.
It's a positive sign. It has to be. You've got to take it that way, because he's been arguably the standout player for Manchester United since he joined the club. The assists and the goals that he scored. The only question we have of him is sometimes his body language, the way he comes across. I think he's a winner. I think it hurts him. Yeah. And I think sometimes we get sucked into that little bit of a petulant kid who's not happy with things going on around him, but that is the sign of a winner as well. And I think maybe he just needs to change his body language a little bit, maybe adapt it and be more positive in the way that he is. But that'll always creep in if you are losing a game or things aren't quite going your way.
Yeah, because I think when you're a captain, you want to probably not see that, and I think that's why maybe some people have questioned it, because, like you say, something goes wrong, he throws his arms in the air. Is that a good example? But then at the same time, you think the younger players coming through must just look at him and look at his ability and what he can produce on a football field. You know, those moments of and he's a winner. So yeah, you can see that. But I think it's a really good sign that he wants to sign.
Expecting any more to leave?
I wouldn't be surprised if Casemiro went.
Really?
Yeah, I just think for the money he's on, what I've seen of him in pre-season, looks like his days, maybe the best days, are a little bit past him. I don't think you can afford to keep him as a squad player. I think if there was an option to possibly move to Saudi, I think it'd be something that might be on both the club and his radar to perhaps get out of there.
And Jadon Sancho, do you see a future for him?
Again, it's what the relationship's like, isn't it, between sort of player and manager, because, again, you want to be getting the best out of a player. So is it right for him personally? Does he think that his football's going to benefit from staying at Manchester United, or does he need to go elsewhere? And from a club's perspective, it's got to be right for both parties.
I think the big thing that we know, which is very evident, is that it was a breakdown in relationship between him and Erik ten Hag, because of the form that he took into Borussia Dortmund. When he went there, he looked happy, he looked like he trimmed down, he looked like he was enjoying his football again. I think there's got to be an understanding of, I think there was a lot of talk about timekeeping as well and things like that. Maybe both sides have come together, worked out the differences. I'd love to see him playing for Manchester United and doing well, because you don't want to see players fail when they go to football teams. So fingers crossed from both Man United's point of view and England's, we get to see the best Jadon Sancho again this year. If it gets to a point before the transfer window where he thinks, I'm not going to be playing, get yourself out of there and get yourself a move where you enjoy your football, because there's nothing more difficult than knowing you've got ability to play, training all week and not getting some reward at the end of the week.
Just finally on this then, where do Manchester United finish? Sue first.
Oh, I don't want to give anything away for our predictions, but just a little snippet. I think they'll finish top 6. Yeah, so I think they'll kick on as long as the injury crisis doesn't happen again.
6th.
6th, okay.